1 minute.
Well, we weren't discussing the individual case, but what we do know really is that the words of warning expressed by the UN Human Rights Committee really rang true in that case, where this woman was really treated and shown to be no more than a vessel in the eyes of the state. And your legislation has deemed to be absolutely inadequate in dealing with the very graphic circumstances similar to the X case. A woman whose life is in danger, who needs an abortion, wasn't able to get one under the legislation. It's as simple as that. And I do think the criteria laid down and the warnings by the UN in terms of how you've structured the legislation means an excessive scrutiny by the medical profession of women, and really it is a chilling effect is still there. Minister, wise up. You're a young man. Ireland's abortion reality and rates are pretty much the same as they are in every other country. It's an instance and a health matter which has affected every Irish family, whether they know it or not. The only thing that's different is we're not allowed to have that medical treatment at home, surrounded by our family and friends. So what it means really is that women and couples who have money in a crisis pregnancy situation can access abortion for all of the many and different reasons, none of them easy, all of them valid. Women and couples who can't either have babies or take risks, and that is simply not acceptable in a modern society. And I think it is time, and some of your own backbenchers have even realised that we need to face up to this disgusting hypocrisy and legislate for abortion at home.
Come on, Deputy Mick Wallace also has 1 minute.
Minister, can the government continue to ignore the fact that about 10 women a day leave this island to end a crisis pregnancy? Can you continue to ignore the fact that an unknown number of women illegally import the abortion pill, risking a 14-year prison sentence because they're so desperate to end the pregnancy? I mean, does the government feel any obligation towards these women? No woman of childbearing age had a say in the '83 referendum. The people of Ireland have never voted to make our abortion laws less restrictive, even though opinion polls have consistently shown that views on abortion have liberalised hugely in the last 3 decades. Does the government have the courage to face up to its responsibility towards women and hold a referendum to repeal the 8th Amendment? You say it won't happen. Well, I just find it just hard to believe, Minister, that you can just dismiss it so out of hand. A number of government deputies have said that the issue needs to be revisited, but not within the lifetime of this Dáil. What's the point of being in power if you're not going to use that power to good effect?
Thank you, Deputy.
I don't see the point of being in power if it's repaired. It should be done in the next government. I mean, is the government more focused on the next election than on the suffering caused by the denial of services to women seeking abortions due to rape, incest, fatal fetal abnormality or serious risk to health? Because that's what it looks like, Minister, which is too bad to say.
Deputy Ruth Coppinger also has 1 minute.
Minister, obviously there's no doubt we have to have the report on this particular case, and we will wait to ask you questions and Minister Fitzgerald as well about your knowledge of events. I'm particularly interested in whether Minister Fitzgerald knew about this case and knew what was happening at the time she was being questioned by the United Nations and said nothing about it and being condemned by the United Nations. But you are right, the constitutional ban on abortion is the problem. As long as a grown woman is equated with a fetus, that is a huge problem. That women are so degraded in this way by our constitution is the problem, and the ban has to go. Because as long as it's there, there can't be any humane provision of abortion in this country. Now, the referendums that are lined up to take place in the spring, including one on marriage equality, we could easily have a referendum to repeal the 8th Amendment on the same day as the marriage equality referendum. And in fact, it will be a double endorsement of progress in this country. It will be a signal to the rest of the world that the Catholic Church's writ doesn't run, despite the wishes of the majority in society. And it will be a hammer blow to the Catholic Church's domination of many areas of life in this country. The Rosa campaign and the Socialist Party deputies will be calling for a referendum to be held on the same day. It just makes absolute sense. If people are coming out to vote, this is a crucial topic that they'd like to have a say on, and the referendums could be held at that time.
Good morning. I now call on the Minister to conclude.
Thanks. Look, there are a couple of things. First of all, I just want to say that I'm glad that we're all agreed that we're not discussing this individual case, because I think if it does transpire that one of the factors of this case, if it does turn out that this young woman's confidentiality was breached at some point, well, I think that's truly awful in its own right, if that turns out to be the case. And I really think that that it's wrong under any circumstances to jump to conclusions about any individual case until we know the facts. And one of the things that disappointed me about this case was hearing on the radio so many voices in the initial days saying so many things that were totally factually incorrect. And I heard that from both sides of the abortion debate and from a number of state-funded bodies who really, quite frankly, should know better in their utterances. Deputy Daly mentioned her original contribution, never again. And look, I understand where she's coming from in that regard. But the sad truth is, and this is the truth, it's never going to be possible to pass legislation that can prevent all tragedies related to pregnancy or abortion. Even if we had very liberal legislation, like they have in the United States or the UK, for example, we would still have the dilemma of late-term pregnancies, people who are 25, 26, 27 weeks pregnant seeking termination. That does happen. That dilemma occurs in the United Kingdom all the time. Thankfully, it doesn't make the papers. In addition to that, even if we did have abortion on request in this country, we would then have the tragedy, of course, of people who can die as a result of a termination of pregnancy. That happens. Very rare, but it does happen. And people who are injured or lose their ability to reproduce in the future. All those things are rare, but they do happen. And I do hope one thing, that when we do have debates about this matter in this country, I hope that we don't shout each other down and interrupt each other, because the problem with this debate in this country, in my view, is that it's been dominated by the extremes, and it's framed in the Catholic versus anti-Catholic view of things rather than what's right and what's wrong. It's framed in terms of Christian ideology versus socialist ideology, being pro-life or anti-life, being pro-choice or anti-choice, as if you could ever reduce it to that, because human experience is not black and white. And medicine is not black and white either. So the idea that there's ever going to be perfect legislation that removes all tragedies related to pregnancy and abortion is just wrong, in my view. In relation to the Eighth Amendment, again, people calling for the repeal of that need to consider what that means. Just repealing the Eighth Amendment means deleting from the Constitution any protection of the life of the mother and the unborn, and replacing it with nothing. So people need to consider whether that's what they want, whether they want to replace it with a different amendment, for example. And even if you do change the Constitution, it doesn't change the legislation. The law actually wouldn't change at all. You would then need to legislate subsequently. And I think it would be a really bad idea in 2015, in the run into a general election, for us to have that kind of debate happening in that milieu, because we've been there before. That's exactly what happened in 1983. In the run-up to a general election, people were put in a position where they made commitments in the run into a general election that maybe they shouldn't have. So let's not repeat the mistake of 1983 and have all that again in 2015. There's a time and a place, I think, for a considered, non-ideological debate and conversation about this matter in this country, but it shouldn't be done on foot of a tragedy or a very hard case, and it shouldn't be done in the run into a general election.
Good morning. Thank you, Minister. That concludes topical issues.